Along the way, Adam has made 35 films that have disrupted expectations, including March of the Penguins, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Dead Poets Society, and Titus, A Plastic Ocean. One of his most recent documentaries has inspired more than 100 new laws around the world and was invited to the United Nations. We reached out to Adam, and even though we never met him before, he instantly said he'd love to join us today. Thank you so much for being here, Adam. And we have an amazing group of students gathered here today. Some of us are about to leave Slippery Rock, and some are early in our journey. But how can people discover what their purpose is and if they're on the right path?
It's so great to be here. Thank you, Bethany. Thank you, Alice. Thank you so much for asking me here. And thanks for everybody for being here. It's great to see everybody's faces. And in the last spring break, before we graduated from college, four friends and I decided that we were going to hike the Appalachian Trail. We drove in an old Volvo to Asheville, North Carolina, found a convenience store and paid Floyd, who ran the convenience store, $10 if we could park our car in the parking lot for a week. He said he would watch it for us. And then he put us in the back of his pickup truck and drove us to the trailhead where we were going to enter and go from the Blue Ridge Mountains to the Great Smoky Mountains across the Appalachian Trail. We had backpacks that were 30 pounds each because we were planning to hike out there for a week. We got in for the first day. We were totally unprepared backpackers. To explain how unprepared we were as backpackers, you know the way you hang your food from a tree so bears can't get it? I'm not even sure if there are bears in the Appalachian Trail, but we thought there were bears. And we tied our food up with a piece of nylon cord, nylon stretches. So we spent half an hour throwing it over the branch of a tree, pulling it up, and then watched as the nylon cord stretched and the food came right down to bare eye level. That's exactly how prepared we were as backpackers. We got 3 days in. The weather was getting cloudy, even though it was March. The forecast, I'm not even sure we had looked at the forecast, but we didn't think the forecast was going to be bad. And on the fourth day, around 4 o'clock in the morning, we all felt the inside surface of our tent pressing against our cheeks because a heavy blanket of snow had fallen overnight. Our tents had become convex or concave, anyway, they were pressing down on our faces on the inside. And when we managed to get out of our tents, all we could see was a field of white. We were in a blizzard. It was obvious that we could not keep going on, but we were already 3 days in. And should we try to turn back and go back 3 days out? Should we go forward 4 days forward? We couldn't really do any of those things. And in fact, we couldn't even see the trail because the trail was completely snowed over. We realized that the only thing that we could do is go down. So we started to go downhill. We were carrying at that point probably 25 pounds on our backs. So as soon as we started to go downhill, we slipped and fell back on our backs. And we ended up sliding down the mountain for 12 hours until we found a highway and hitchhiked back to the convenience store. And Floyd said, I was wondering when you guys were going to come back here. And there we were. And I start with that because we thought we knew what we were going to do. We had a plan. We were as prepared as we knew how to be. And then the plan changed, but we managed to get out because the only direction was the direction that gravity would take us. Sometimes gravity is the place that takes you where you want to go. I'm very flattered that some of you have seen the TEDx talk that I gave. Alice, I'm very flattered that you included as a part of your coursework. And I'd love to just have a discussion with everybody here, because sometimes I get emails from people who have seen that TED Talk where they say, I'm trying to find my life purpose. Can you help me? The answer is no, actually, I can't help you. because I don't know you, and that's your work for you to do. But sometimes gravity will just take you where you need to go, to the highway where you can hitchhike and find find your transportation and get to where you need to be. Um, I have found that the the path of finding one's purpose in life is sometimes very difficult, and it's always very fulfilling. And in my own journey, it is the divining rod that I use for deciding if I want to get involved in anything that I do, any relationship, any project, any employment, whether it feels consistent with who I am and what I want to be doing. I've also found that it's really good to give yourself permission to change what you think your purpose is, and that it changes over time. The purpose that I had a decade ago is not exactly the same as the purpose that I have today, and the purpose that I have a decade from now will probably be different from the purpose that I have today, because we have life experience and things change. I'd love to. I would like to have more of a discussion, and I have various things that I can spice into our discussion as we go. But I would love to just start by uh, asking any of you, particularly some of those who may be about to leave Slippery Rock because you're in your final year, how you've been approaching your sense of purpose and what purpose means to you, and what questions you have about that. Is that okay if I just start there and see if anybody would like to help to guide the discussion as we go? I can't, if somebody was unmuted, I can't really hear you.
I don't know if someone was going to talk or not, but if not, I will.
Go for it.
Okay. My name's Michaela. I am a senior getting ready to graduate here at Slippery Rock. I'm a dual major in special education and in nonprofit management. And I actually took Empowered to Serve with Alice last spring, the first time that she taught it. I haven't seen your TED Talk, though. I would like to. So in her class last semester was really the first time, like, I kind of knew what I was interested in and what I might like to do, or the population I might want to work with. But taking that time last semester and really thinking about, what do I want to do with my life? What is my goal? And I found through that class that I believe my purpose as of right now is to change the lives for the better of individuals with intellectual and physical disabilities.
Beautiful. How does having come to that understanding about yourself shape how you're approaching what you're going to do after Slippery Rock?
So before, it was already my major here, and that was something I was already interested in. But I think that it just, like, identifying that as a passion and as a purpose gives you so much more of a drive, and it gives you something when you set, like you say, this is my purpose and this is definitely what I want to do. It gives you motivation to work harder at it and learn more and be more passionate about it.
I see there's, I see, Kim, you have a question that you put into the chat. Kim, would you like to unmute and say it for the group? Are you in a place where you can do that?
Sure. I just asked, do you have any suggestions for narrowing focus when you have varied or diverse interests?
I do. And first, I think it's fabulous to have varied and diverse interests, because probably each one of us has about 8 different careers in our work life. So we'll probably have a chance to explore many of our diverse interests, and our interests will change over time. I think maybe to, to be, your question is really about how you narrow your focus. And generally speaking, if you want to narrow your focus, it's because you don't yet have as much information as you could have about the many interests. And there are 16 different things that you could do, 16 different places where you could work or different communities that you could serve. Which one do you really want to go serve now and first? And so two comments on that. The first is it's really good to go investigate and explore and to discover early on if a community or a passion or a work area that you thought was great isn't great. That's a win. Let's be really clear. Knowing that there's something you don't want to do, Xing it off of that list so you only have 15 instead of 16 is a win, because you don't have to spend your time going down that road. There was and also the idea of regrets, that you might get to be 40 or 50 years old and say, oh, I wish I would have done this, and you didn't do it. Well, let's find out now if you really want to do that. A couple of years ago, somebody came into my office and he was about 50 years old. He said, I always wanted to be a talent agent. I always wanted to work with one of the big talent agencies like William Morris or CAA, but my parents wanted me to go to law school, and I did that, and then I went to business school, and then I became a stockbroker, and I've worked on Wall Street for 20 years. I've made a lot of money. I really hate it. I'm really unhappy. I wish I'd been a talent agent. I said, okay, do you really care about that? He said, yes, I really care about that. I said, okay, well, here's a process. And if you really still want to be a talent agent, let's see if we can get you your foot in the door. So I talked to him about how you could do that. He spent some time. He got an offer. 3 months later, he was back in my office. He said, they hired me. I hate it. All I have to do is I'm on the phone and I yell at people all day. I said, okay, well, good to know. Now what are you going to do next? But he'd spent 25 years wishing he would have done something else without figuring out 25 years ago, maybe going into one of those places of work, discovering that all they do is yell at people all day, and you don't want to be in that toxic environment. So he didn't have to live with all that regret. So perhaps let's talk for a moment about the actual process that you follow. Because one of the things that I would love to be able to do with this group is give you some real practical, actionable takeaways that you can use. Because Kim, I'll bet you're not the only person who has this question or will face this question of how do you figure out where you want to go? And even if you know where you want to go, how do you actually get in there? And if you would like, with the assent of the group, I could take about 10 minutes and talk about a process. Would that be okay? Okay, so this process works. I do not do this for a living. I do this because it's my passion. I love to talk with people about career and career path. This process has put about 250 people into jobs that they love in the past decade. But you have to do the process. And the process is a process of very specific information interview. Is the concept of an information interview one that you have been introduced to before? Yes? Yeah, maybe? Okay. It looks like maybe for some people. The idea of an information interview is that there is no job on the table. You are just going for information. And it's really good that there's no job on the table, because if you approach people and say, I'm looking for a job, they won't meet with you because there are no jobs. And they don't want to say no. They don't want to disappoint you. So they're just going to say, sorry, there are no jobs. But instead, if you approach people and say, just graduated from Slippery Rock, I'm at a transitional point in my career right now. There was a point where you also were in a position like mine, and I'd really love to find out about how you handled your first approach and your career transitions. People are very likely to say yes. In fact, you'll get about a 20% yes rate for that kind of a request, because most people, particularly in the nonprofit arena, also actually in my industry, the entertainment industry, we're give back people. We were not born into these jobs. We wanted to be there. We come because we're purpose driven, because there's something that really excites us. So you'll get about a 20% yes rate for something like that. And then in the non-pandemic times, or when we're able to go out and physically see people, we can physically go see people, or we go see people on Zoom right now. And we just pose that question directly to them. We say, Kim, there was a point where you were in a career transition. How did you approach that? And then the most important thing, next thing that you do is that you stop talking and let them talk. Because there's this weird psychological thing that happens when somebody is talking to you and they see you listening, they think you're really smart. That's because people have egos. They think if you're listening, you must be really smart. And you let them talk and you listen to what it is. And then you ask them about what they're doing and what a typical day is in their life right now, and you find out. And if you cast your net wide initially, because there are 16 different things you want to do, and you reach out to people in all 16 areas, probably you're going to find out that only 3 of them right now would be a good fit for you. You find out that the actual day-to-day isn't what you thought it was going to be. Like this guy who came into my office and thought he wanted to be an agent and didn't realize that agents yell at people all day. So you have to find out. So you'll find out these things about what feels good. But along the way, here's what also is happening. After you talk to each person, you ask if there's someone else that you could talk to, get a referral. And then when you do that and you reach out to the next person, you say, hey, Michaela, Barbara suggested that I reach out to you. You're going to get about a 30% yes rate because Barbara referred me to Michaela. Okay, because now we have a little bit of credibility. We've got a referral. And then you go and have that conversation with Michaela. And then Michaela, who else could I talk to? Michaela says, well, maybe you could talk to Madison. And now Madison's going to say yes because Michaela suggested that we talk to you. So you build. So what you're doing now is you are building out your contact database. And in a few months, you're going to have 100 new people in your contact database. It's essential to build your contact database larger as you enter into your career and career path, because by definition, the people in your network, in your contact database, are not going to hire you unless they have already. Because if they're already in your contact database and they haven't offered you a job, they're not going to, because they already know you. Therefore, you need to make it bigger. You need a bigger universe to go after. So now we're 3 or 4 months in, you've got 100 more people in your contact database. And now people are going to start, you will also have developed a greater knowledge of the 1 or 2 areas that are now really fascinating to you. Maybe there are even positions that you didn't even know existed before. They're jobs that, because until you're actually inside some organizations, you don't even know that certain kinds of jobs and positions exist, and you start to gravitate to it. And now you begin to get more focused, and you discover that what you really want to do is become a community manager. And you find out that Claire is a community manager. So you say, Claire, can I talk to you about how you became a community manager? There's no job on the table. You're not asking for a job. You say, Claire, tell me about being a community manager. And then you say, gee, Claire, are there any other community managers I can talk to? And Claire says, yeah, Kirsten's a community manager. I know Kirsten. And now you reach out to Kirsten. So now you're beginning to build out your network of community managers. Not only that, you're developing, now you're starting to understand the geography of community management. You understand the vocabulary, the things that are important, the acronyms, the styles, these things that are all inside that you haven't had a chance to be exposed to yet. So you're now amassing this whole database. Oh, by the way, now there's 50 community managers who know who you are. And now when there's a position, they say, whoa, interesting. Kim was in my office a couple of weeks ago. Wonder if Kim could do that. And now you're in a position of being more fluent in this area. And this is the thing about getting jobs, because as you know, there are no jobs, right? We know there are no jobs. And we also know that the unspoken truth of many organizations is that when they post a job, they know who they want to hire. And sorry if I'm like pulling back the curtain here, but they know who they want to hire. They post the job for legal and HR reasons, so they can say we looked at everybody, but they know that they wanted to hire somebody. So they go through the exercise, which may just be theater of interviewing people, but they knew that they wanted to hire somebody already. They had pre-picked that person and they give the job to that person. Well, you kind of want, and the point is that often jobs are created because we know somebody. That there's an or a person comes with talent, and then an organization realizes they have that need, and this person could fill that need. So therefore, you have to be in the right place at the right time. And this entire process that I've just suggested of information interviews works because statistically it puts you at more places at more times. So you just end up in the right place at the right time because you're out there more. Now, this is the place where people sometimes stop. It takes 100. You've got to have 100 information interviews. And I set that number high. For me, when I first got into, my first career was in theater. When I moved from theater to movies, it took me 87. 88 was the company that hired me. It was Disney, and they hired me. I've known some people where they got a job offer on the third one. But I say 100 because if you email me 3 months after you graduate and say, Adam, this is awful. I've done 60 information interviews. I'm getting no traction. I don't know what to do. I'm still living at home. My parents are about to kick me out and they're saying, why don't you just go get a job? I'm going to say, great, you only have 40 more. Keep going. And you've got to stick with it. The 250 people that I mentioned that have gotten jobs through this process in the past decade are the ones who didn't stop. You've got to go through the 100. And there are so many benefits to going through the 100. In addition to just having 100 people now in your contact database, because then when you get hired, which you will, you're going to know a bunch of other people who are going to become resources to you. And when suddenly you're in your new job and somebody says, hey, can you figure out how to do this? You say, gee, I don't know. But I remember talking to Madison. Madison did that. And you call Madison and say, Madison, who was your contact who were able to get you this? And now you're of greater value because you have all these people. And then in a couple of months, Madison might call you and say, hey, Kim, how did you do that? And now you've built out your network in a bigger way. This process truly, truly works if you go to 100. And if you set yourself for 100, especially coming out of the education that you've had and the program that you've had, which is so excellent and so highly regarded, you're going to find it. But this will also begin to address the question you started with, Kim, which is, how do you narrow your focus? By definition, you will at a point wake up in the morning, it'll be snowing, you can't go forward or backwards, you have to slide downhill, and gravity is going to take you to where you need to be. What else should we talk about? Who else has questions or comments or disagreements? Or has anybody tried that and had experiences? And you can put it in chat or raise your hand or just unmute.
I was thinking that LinkedIn is a great way to do that. We actually went to a nonprofit and leadership conference, and one of the presenters talked about during COVID and during the quarantine, she was reaching out to like one person in her contact list and just saying, hey, can we meet for a virtual Zoom meeting? And that she was able to really grow her contact list that way. So that seems to be an easier way to do it.
It is really easy. And, pretty much everybody I know gets a bunch of, I would say, spam messages and spam invites on LinkedIn, particularly when they're at certain points in their career. But we can tell the ones that are real. And the ones that are real, where they mention something specific about, like, I read your book, I saw this work, I was very impressed at this company where you work, and you're very specific, those have a pretty high response rate. So if you're authentic and you're well motivated and real, you're going to get a pretty high response rate from that. I'm scanning faces. What else would be helpful? What else would you like to talk about? Has anyone had an experience where there was something you thought you wanted to do and then you got into it and discovered, oh no, I didn't. I thought it was X, but it's really Y. Barbara, I see you're nodding your head.
I had that experience before I chose Slippery Rock as my college. I was actually going to go to a trade school for music production, media production. And about 2 months before my graduation, I was like, I don't want to go to a trade school. So I scrambled, found Slippery Rock, but knew it was a perfect fit based on class sizes and the fact that both my parents graduated from here. And then that even happened again whenever I went to orientation. I was still a media production major, and I went and sat in like the communication department orientation, and I hear somebody mention public relations. I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I graduated with 60 kids. You could be a teacher, you go into the military, you could be a doctor. Like it was pretty cookie cutter career options that they taught us about. And I kind of just, like you mentioned, followed the gravity. And I transferred on my way home, and I'm very, very happy. So yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. But I definitely understand what you're saying with having to change my mind and realizing that that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, Michaela just put in chat that Michaela, you started in nursing school for a while and then discovered that wasn't the right thing for you, right?
Yep.
Anybody else have stories about that you came here after thinking you wanted to be somewhere else and discovering it wasn't for you at this moment in your life?
Whenever I came to Slippery Rock, I was the first gen student interested in science and biology all of my life. And I was like, I want to be a bio teacher because I want to help like other people learn. And within the first 6 weeks, I realized that's not where I wanted to be, nor where I needed to be. Luckily, I stumbled upon like nonprofit management, and I love it. But at first, I was just like, oh, this isn't what I wanted, nor was this what I expected.
Yeah, Kirsten, it looked like you were nodding your head also. What was your experience?
I started off applying to vet tech school and I got in, and then I decided I didn't want to go there and I wanted to be a full-on vet. So I came to Slippery Rock Bio pre-vet, and after the first semester I realized I was not going to be able to do that, and so I switched to communication PR. And then after doing that, I realized I wanted to do more nonprofit stuff, so I added nonprofit management.
Fabulous. Yeah. And has anybody also had experiences like Emma was just talking about, where you entered some world and then you realize there's this whole kind of job category I never knew about? Like Emma just said, PR, I didn't even know that was a thing that you could make a career out of. Anyone else had those experiences? And I'm curious what those job categories or those pathways were that you hadn't known about before.
So I talked about this a lot with Allison in Power to Serve. In high school, I used to sit on my computer and I would Google like careers that help people or jobs that change the world, and nothing points to like get a career in the nonprofit
Right.
world. So that was something that I didn't realize really existed. I knew that nonprofit organizations were a thing, but I don't think that in high school unless you have experience with one, I at least didn't really know what that meant. And I didn't know that there was a possibility of taking that as a career path. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog.
That's okay. We like to have friends here. I think you're right. I think most people in the world don't know that there's a whole set of multiple career tracks in the 501c3, 501c4 universe. And as you know, as Bethany mentioned, I've spent half my life in nonprofits, but you know, big ones and small ones. My first career was in theater, which is truly about as nonprofit as you can get. I mean, like seriously, there were 6 months where we couldn't pay the rent, and the only reason that we weren't closed is because we were physically squatting in the building. So that's about as nonprofit as you can get. And then, you know, National Geographic, which feels like a government agency, is a gigantic nonprofit with, you know, with very large budgets for various kinds of things. So you know, there's quite the range. How important is it to love what you do? How do you explain that to people in your lives who don't understand that? That's a great, is that, Alice, is that your question? I think
I
that
know my
there,
students talk about that a lot, you know?
yeah,
Can you really do for a living what you love? And how do you justify that to people that have never really done anything that they love?
heck yeah. I mean, I haven't worked since I left college. It is my, you know, like that's my lived experience is, have I spent 28-hour days and 8-day weeks and ground things out? Yeah, but has it been like studying for archaeology finals? No. The one class I failed in college, but it's like, no, it's different. And I think that there are times in our lives where we have to be expedient, where we have certain responsibilities to ourselves and others. Sometimes we do things just because, you know, we drive Uber because we have to pay the rent. You know, I put myself through college being a garbage collector. It was, so that was it, but and it's not because I woke up and said I love being a garbage collector. Although I found things to love about it, I found it interesting from a sociological point of view. I learned a lot about sociology by being a garbage collector. But sometimes we just do things that are expedient. And I think the question you asked, which is how do you explain to people who don't do that? Because I think most people hate their jobs. Most people can't wait to get out of their jobs, can't wait to retire, just fantasize something else. And this happens a lot in the arts, where a lot of people have to try to explain to their parents why they want to be a writer, a singer, a composer, an actor, an artist, a designer. And the parent says, please just go to law school or just get a CPA. And they say, no, I don't want to get a CPA. I hate that. I want to be a designer. I don't know how you explain that. But the explanation will test it will test how much you really believe it. And I think, you know, my lived experience is that people who moved to the place of their passion, of their love, long term are much happier. They are not like that stockbroker who came into my office and said my mom and dad wanted to be a lawyer and I went onto Wall Street and I made a lot of money. I think, and I have found that people who are motivated only by making a lot of money, well, first, they don't always make a lot of money, or they end up making it and losing it, but they're also not happier. They're really not happier. And we don't take it with us. The only thing we ever take with us when we leave this planet are our relationships. And I think it's more important to love who you're working with and who you're working for than, in some ways, that's as much important as to love what you're doing. If it's a really good idea to work with good people. If there's any, you know, I don't, in my own experience, I don't think I am better, smarter, more talented than anybody else. And I think that the good experiences I've had, the successes I've had, are because I've chosen to work with good people, and I've chosen not to work on things that seemed promising or profitable if the people were not good, if the people were not well motivated. So you know, Alice, for me, a lot of doing what you love is also about working with people whom you at least like, and at least you have some commonalities of values and interest. I think otherwise it's very difficult. And if you're in a position where, look, as you all know, some nonprofit managers get paid very well and some get paid very poorly. And if you're in that position of being less well paid because you are working with an organization that serves a massive need but does not have a massive budget, you may have to answer to somebody who says, well, why are you doing that? You could go get a real job. And you may just have to say, this is my real job. This is what I care about. And I don't really, I don't think that your happiness, once you have your basic needs met, I don't really believe that your happiness is based on your paycheck at all. Because we know really unhappy people who have very big paychecks. And we know really happy people who don't. I think money is not the litmus of anything. Once, of course, if you have basic needs, you got to meet them. If you have family to support, you've got to do that. That is your responsibility. But beyond that, it's not. I think that is not the key. And also, I think that I think many people who have less annual income are better savers than people who have higher annual income and blow their money on expensive cars, expensive meals out, expensive vacations, expensive things, expensive alimony, expensive all kinds of stuff. And I've actually been stunned in my universe because look, I'm comfortable. But I'm certainly not super rich, and I'm not super rich because I've chosen to make social impact documentaries instead of other certain things that I don't care about as much. But I certainly, travel in a universe where there are people who are super rich. But it's really interesting, and I've discovered that many of the people who appear super rich have less savings than I do in my 401k because they blew their money. So I don't know. It's a long way around the block to respond to the prompt you gave me, Alice.
I'll just, if I could, I'm quite a bit older than most of the faces that I'm seeing, and I sort of lived this in that I was at university and wanted to be a theater major, and my parents said, "What are you going to do with that? And you've got to do something more practical. You're capable of more." These types of things that they tell you. So I went to law school and I graduated from law school, and I hated most of it. And then I worked in the legal field and again, hated it.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up staying home for a while to raise my kids. Where do you think I went when I needed to go back to work?
You went back to theater.
I did.
Of course you did.
And I just don't think, if it is a true passion, I just don't think it leaves you. And on the upside, if you're in the wrong place, you can always return. And I was lucky in that I was able to manage a theater company using my law background. So I was able to use some of that. So, I don't believe anything you learn is a waste. But I definitely have taken a different approach with my boys. One of the things we say is, look at what you would do for free. I would, spend 24 hours in a theater if I could. That helps you to identify your passion. What am I doing for free? I mean, we're not talking just like playing video games and stuff, but
although I do know somebody who played video games a lot and now plays video games as a tester for a video game company, and he makes $200,000 a year.
Oh my God. Yeah. So
talk about following your passion and just having a good time.
Yes. So I tell my boys, follow your passion.
Going along with just doing what you would do for free, another way to think, a variation on that theme is do what's just so easy for you. Every one of us, there's something we do that's just so easy for us. We think nothing of it. We think it's just the easiest thing in the world. We do it in 10 seconds. It takes other people 10 hours. We do it in 10 seconds because it's just the way we operate. You will always be paid to do that. Whatever that is, you can always get. Now, it may not be the thing you love to do the most, but if the thing that you do easiest, you can always get paid for because that's hard for everybody else. And you may go through some process of discernment of figuring out what that is. But everyone has those, those skills. Have any of you self-identified what that happens to be for you? See, like me, my special gift is I'm a pre-planner, which is why I could become a producer. That if you say there need to be 5 elephants on the hill for Oliver Stone to shoot them tomorrow morning, I immediately can think of 5 people to call, 5 people to call after that, who to call if the 3rd elephant doesn't show up, what to shoot if the elephants can't come until Saturday morning. And I'll do that in about 5 minutes. It's just like the way my brain works. But that's my superpower, is I'm a pre-planner and I have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C immediately because I know something's going to go wrong. But does anybody else have interesting, weird superpowers like that? Not mine, but your own. Emma, go ahead. What's yours? But you have to unmute. Can't hear you.
Test. It takes me a minute.
Okay, got it.
I've got a weird one, and I'm not really sure how I'll apply it in the professional world, but we're big movie people at my house, which actually my first movie was March of the Penguins. The killer whale scene freaked me out, so I'm going to blame that on you.
Sorry about that.
No, I can memorize movie lines and pretty much like anything, movie lines, random bits of trivia, songs, song tunes, pretty much after like hearing something or seeing something once. So I believe when we took a quiz earlier in the semester, I believe that trait was called, can you remind me, Dr. Del Vecchio, what it was something about absorbing information, but that's one that I'm pretty proud of.
It's fantastic. Is there anyone else? I'm curious.
So I've been dyeing and working with hair since I've been 8 years old. So now I'm able to like kind of look at someone's hair, determine their hair history. So like all the dyes that they might have used before, and figure out the chemicals that they would need to fix their hair, quote unquote, like to the different color that they want to go to, and be able to plan that out within like 10 minutes.
That's amazing. I've never heard of anybody who had that superpower.
It's terrifying because if you mess up, you mess up.
It's fabulous. Anyone else? I love that. Well, you all have one. Everyone absolutely has one, at least. What else?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious to know, what do you think of today's hustle culture? You know, that like it's Monday morning, get up and get it, that sort of thing. That's, work hard all the time. Have you heard of that? I mean, I feel like it's on like Pinterest and it's like this motivational stuff that's constantly in our headspace. So I'm wondering what you think of hustle culture.
Well, you're talking to someone who wakes up at 5 o'clock every morning, and but so that's what I do, and I do work long, but I don't really. I don't know. It feels a little bit artificial to me, doesn't it? it feels a little bit forced. I don't wake up at 5 in the morning because I'm forcing myself. It's because uh, I have all these things. I have a lot of plates spinning at any one given time. And I get up and say, okay, well, what plate am I going to spin first this morning? And what's the critical path? And what do I have to get done by the end of the day? And I go do that. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of forcing things. And I mean, I think that so much of what we see on social is designed for people to try to get their own follower base and is not really authentic. And I think a lot of it is fake. All of these little vignettes that we're seeing now on Instagram and Facebook, where people are holding up a series of signs and doing a reveal, and like where somebody's blindfolded and then they take off the blindfold and they embarrass them. I think they're all auditioning for reality TV shows. I don't really believe most of them. So I was like, what? So I don't spend too much of my time there. I was just looking over here at, I was just looking over here at my notes of some of the things that I thought it would be fun to talk about. And we talked about a lot of it. We talked about an early fit. If you find an early fit, that's great. But if you find out that something early is a bad fit, that's an absolute win, because you can now tick that off your list. You don't have to waste your time and you don't have to have regrets 24 years later. We talked about information interviews. We talked about, I mentioned early on that you can change your purpose. It's so good to have a purpose. And it's just, even if you write it down, it's just electrons that you can change. So you have absolute privilege to change your purpose whenever you want to, because it's yours. The other thing about purpose that I kind of love is to have something at the end of that sentence, which is about the ultimate effect. Like that phrase, in order to, and then how you complete that. So there is some larger rationale for why you do what you do. So if you, if your purpose is to create environments where special needs children can have the best learning outcomes. Now let's finish that sentence, in order that, or in order to, and now somehow you would finish that. And that then takes you up to a larger or grander sense of things that is always a North Star that you can move towards, and you can calibrate your actions and your activities too. Something that I do. I want, Michaela, can you talk more about what Alice's husband quoted?
Alice might be able to talk about it better than me. Alice, it was whenever we were doing whenever he was talking at the alumni house. And I don't know what he was quoting, but it was whenever he said, I must help these people. I have seriously had that stuck with me for the last few weeks. I don't know if you know what he was quoting or not.
I think he was talking about when you see people that have a need, instead of walking over them or around them, if that need draws you in, then you must do something about it. That it's not, he talked about, it's more than just a paycheck, and you have to be who you are. And if you can't get it out of your head, then you're going to have to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, we can think about ourselves as a puzzle or jigsaw puzzle pieces, and sometimes we experience something, we get in situations, and all those puzzle pieces fall on the floor, and at that moment, you know that you have to do something to put the puzzle back together. And when you feel that, and it's very physical, you feel it in your body. Feel it in your body, and you have to trust your body. We live in a society that's very unembodied. Zoom, of course, has been the past year a super unembodied experience because we're now little squares on the screen. Although there's something cool about that, which is that the playing field is now entirely level, that we're all squares on the screen, and we're all exactly the same size. We're all exactly the same height. And nobody can wear expensive shoes and impress people because most of us aren't probably wearing shoes. So there's level of level playing fieldness in in Zoom, but it's a completely unembodied experience, which means that we have to really work to get connected to people in the Zoomiverse. And when we're able to go back and be in person, making that connection is significant. But being in our bodies and being open to understanding the emotions that we have. I think in our society, we're pretty closed off from emotions a lot, or our emotions are overdetermined, by which I mean we express the emotions that we know that social pressure says we're supposed to feel or that we're supposed to demonstrate. I think there's a lot of performative emotion without the introspection of seeing, is this emotion really authentic to me, or is it just what I am supposed to be expressing right now? And if you've developed the sensitivity of that gut feeling, and to really know to trust your gut, I think, Grace, this is also part of the answer to the question you just put in chat, which is how do you know when it's time to change your purpose? If your gut doesn't feel it, it's time to change it or modify it or add a word or change something about it. The from a purely scientific basis, we make decisions emotionally, but we choose socially not to accept that. But we all, including, and I, as it happens, I'm privileged to consult to some very big tech companies, which are very data driven, and all they do is talk about metrics and analytics, and they make decisions emotionally, even though they don't know it. But what happens is they make a decision emotionally, and then in microseconds, they find the data that justifies their decision and then give you the data and analytics that support their decision. And I'll bet all of you have been in situations in a company or in some kind of social circumstance where somebody who is in authority made a decision that you knew was not the right decision, but they made it just because they convinced themselves emotionally it was the thing they wanted to do, right? So we've all seen that happen, right? So, and it's because we make decisions emotionally first. I have a friend who works with people who have had traumatic brain injury. And some of the people that she works with have had the emotional center of the brain destroyed. So they function, they can talk, they can do all kinds of things, but they actually do not process emotion in the way that most of us do. And if she walks with one of those people to a supermarket and stands them in front of a case of orange juice, where there's 40 different kinds of orange juice, right? It's like with pulp, without pulp, sweetened, not sweetened, large, small, like cartons or jars or cans or glass, and says to one of these individuals, pick out the orange juice you would like for breakfast tomorrow morning. This individual will stand there for an hour unable to make a decision because those decisions are emotionally based and they don't have the emotional connection to a brand or a size or a flavor that allow them to make a decision. So we actually make decisions emotionally. The extent to which we can be sensitive enough to the authenticity of our real feelings, and I think that's really hard. I think that's really hard today. I think there's so much overlay, social pressure, and again, what I call the overdetermination of the way we are supposed to be, express ourselves, look, talk, speak, feel, respond to things, that I think most people don't even know what their real emotions are. But if we can get to that place, I think we are in a really good place to make good decisions for ourselves and for the people we love. The lawyer, I don't know if he ever found his purpose. I never saw him again. But I hope so.
We've
I
been
hope so.
talking a lot this semester in the Empowered to Serve class about finding a way to knit the behavioral domains together instead of having ourselves silos. So how do we knit our psychomotor, our affective, our cognitive, and most importantly, probably that conative domain, that's the part that pushes us to strive and drive and reach those goals. And, you know, I say to students that it's sort of like we're each a piece of embroidery thread. And if you look at embroidery thread, there are really 5 little strands. It's not a thread, it's 5 strands. But lucky is the person who has figured out how to wrap those tightly so it looks like one thread. And I think that happens when the psychomotor, the affective, the cognitive, and that conative domain all come together for us. And just the other thing I wanted to mention, in the class, we also watched Steve Harvey's video about fried chicken. You know, he's really hysterical in that way. And he says, you know, your passion will find you if you get out of the way. And, you know, so take the time to let it find you. You don't have to force it. And in his video, he says, if you're the person who does fried chicken the best, then fried chicken, you'll find a way to make a living and to make a life. So yeah,
I love the thread analogy. That's a very beautiful metaphor.
So we don't have too much time. In fact, we're right at 6 o'clock, but I would like to ask people to share with Adam, what's your takeaway? What do you have at 6:01 that you didn't have? I say this every day in my class, right? What do you have at 6:01 that you didn't have at 4:55?
Wait, do you really end your classes like this? Because that's how I end my classes.
Yeah, I do every time.
Fabulous, right?
Except today we did 30-second affirmations where each person on the screen offered someone else 30 seconds of an affirmation. But so what do you take it with you at 6:01 that you didn't have at 4:55? And you can write that in the chat too, because it'd be kind of cool to have that big list, but also really if you'd like to articulate that.
I think we live in like a culture where if you're not on the right path right away, you're oftentimes seen as a failure. You're not a failure if you think you're found your purpose and you find out you're wrong. That just means that you are on your path to finding your purpose.
Thanks, Maddie. Anybody else? I'm seeing a lot of things in the chat, so.
When we first watched your video on finding your purpose in class, I think it was the 3rd thing you said, who do you want to help? And I was like, there's so many people that I want to help and there's so many things I want to do. And I started like going into this spiral. So I'm so glad that Kim asked that question about what do you do if you have a variety of and things that you want to do. So thank you for that big takeaway on you don't have to figure it out right now and it could change over your lifetime.
I'm interested to start the informational interviews and see where that leads. I think that'll be a good use of my time post-graduation. I'll have some free time, so maybe I can fill it in with some interview and meeting requests.
Anybody else?
There we go. I put it in the chat, but as I mentioned when I talked before, just following the gravity and letting that take you to wherever your purpose is. Trusting your gut. I like that.
Yeah, I had a mentor who said to me one time, Alice, it's okay because most of life's a happy accident. Anybody else? Bethany, you want to talk to us a little bit and close things out for us? The light went out on you in the
Yeah,
office.
the light just turned off. There hasn't been much movement. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Adam, for coming and talking to us today. And we really appreciate it. Thank you to all of the Slippery Rock students and all the non-Slippery Rock people that joined today. Yeah, thank you for this great presentation. It was amazing.
Well, it was so much fun for me. My takeaway is that you are all pretty awesome, and it's great to meet you all. And you're all going to do exactly what you're supposed to do, which is go out and make the world a better place. And so it's been a privilege. And Bethany and Alice, thank you so much for inviting me.